If you are listening to this podcast, it means you are searching for someone who understands you, someone who gets you. You are yearning to be understood and to belong. Welcome to the Someone Gets Me podcast, where we help smart, talented, and sensitive people navigate an often insensitive world. Let's welcome your host, ambassador, author, speaker, and mentor, Diane Allen. Diane has the experience and knowledge to educate and inspire, as she has been there and understands your unique intensities and their challenges.
Hey everybody, it's Diane at Someone Gets Me. And today we have an interview for you that is so unique and amazing and multidimensional that I don't even really know where to start, because the woman I have to speak with you today is actually 12 hours away from me around the globe. Sylviane is in Australia, and of course I'm in Florida in the United States, and so it's the night here and it's the morning there. And so with the modern technology we have, we get to connect and know each other. She was referred to me by my previous guest, Eric. So if you haven't heard Eric's amazing interview on relationships, they know each other. And now I have this great connection. So see, podcasting can really get you all around the world, literally. So Sylviane is a yoga teacher, and she's a mentor, and she really helps guide people in the healing way of life. I looked up her website, and she was talking on it about postural psychology, I believe is what it is. She can correct me if I'm wrong. And she does all these amazing healing things that here I've really never heard of very much. She works with the principles of quantum physics and biomechanics and neuromuscular rehab and things that really help our body heal energetically from pain and stress and just that heaviness of life sometimes. The one thing that I know about her energy already is that she's very light and very centered and calm, something all of us with overexcitabilities really could have in our life. So Sylviane is here today to talk to us about overthinking and being overwhelmed and being sensitive, and how to create a profession and a life's work and a vision through all kinds of life experiences, because she's had some amazing ones and some challenging ones. I'm going to let her tell you those stories. So join me right now and welcome Sylviane Gordon-James to the show. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Diane. I'm really, really excited to be on your show and to share whatever experience I've had and maybe help, even if it's one person out there. I'll be very grateful. So thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I just think this will be so exciting. So I always like to start with, you like to mentor people and you teach yoga and things. And so there's always a road that gets us to these great things that we do. So could you share a little bit about yourself, maybe a little bit about your journey? I know that you were born in France and you're in Australia now, so I'm sure there's a story in that. And how you got where you are and kind of like who you are as the person, so that then as we go forward, and the listeners will know, we'll all know.
Yeah, sure. Indeed, my journey started in France. I think a journey with my parents, like every one of us, I believe, is one that shape us. And for me, it was feeling misunderstood and unheard throughout my youth. I was in a family that decided what I liked and what I didn't like, who I should be and who I shouldn't be, what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And of course, what I should do was dictated by my father, who out of love, of course, wanted me to be in marketing and business. Little by little, I decided to give up the fight and to follow what he wanted me to do. So I ended up in Paris, in a school where I studied marketing and business, while my parents were still in Madagascar, where I lived for a while. And I remember being in this company, which was a big company. Hewlett Packard at the time was a bit like Mac nowadays. And 9 months down the track, wondering what the hell I was going to do with this. I didn't like being there. I didn't like being under any authority. I decided that it wasn't for me. And one day, after seeing some amazing photos from a friend who was traveling the world, I thought, this is what I want to do. And so I gave up business and this company. I wrote a letter to my father, wondering how he was going to take it. And I sold everything I had in Paris. I took a one-way ticket to Malaysia because at the time we were young and we heard that in Malaysia you could have really cheap tickets. So I ended up in Malaysia, in Penang. I remember buying a world map and put it in front of me and having this sensation of absolute freedom. And the thought that from now on I could really let go of everything that I had done before and maybe start afresh and be who I wanted to be. So I picked a few destinations just to travel for a couple of years. What happens, of course, is that in that freedom to want to be yourself, a lot of what you have been bubbles up to the surface and comes and stares you in the face and lets you know that in order to be a new you, you've got to accept and heal what you have been before. So within that freedom, I learned a lot about who I was and the challenge that you face when you deal with this kind of truth. And of course, all the array of anxiety and sometimes spurt of depression and wondering how we deal with all this. Eventually, I ended up in Australia where I still live. And I was introduced to a yoga course when I was about 32 or 3 years old. And I absolutely fell in love with it. Because from a very early age, I was a dancer. I moved. I loved everything about the body. I also loved everything about the mind. I remember at 11 years old, waking up in the middle of the night after having a very vivid dream about dying and waking up screaming that I didn't want to die. And it was so vivid and so real to me that at this very tender age, I started to look into religion and philosophies and astrology and Zenism and Taoism and trying to make sense of life and death and everything in between. So when I arrived in that yoga class, it was this mix of body and mind suddenly that really talked to me profoundly. I become a yoga lover, and then I had the luck to be sent to a teacher who was the senior Iyengar teacher in Australia, who picked me for 4 years intensive training in Iyengar in India and Australia. So that's how it started, really.
Oh, that's fascinating. What a great journey, right? And the ability to be so free and follow that vision, when so many people listen to the restraint. So you're a yoga teacher and you're in Australia and you keep moving forward in your career, right?
Yeah.
So where did you start, or how did it happen that you worked a lot, or you still work, I guess, with a lot of people that have accidents and injury and long chronic unresolved pain? I have a lot of clients that have that, and I know a lot of people, and so how did you get from traveler yoga, really cool, learning all these great things, into this level of helping people with these unresolved chronic pain and stress in their body?
Well, when you train in Iyengar yoga, and I don't know if people know this branch of yoga, but it's one of the most well-known. Iyengar and Ashtanga are the most well-known form of yoga in the world. And when you work in Iyengar, you really work to feel every beat of your body. You isolate a lot of muscles from the biggest to the smallest muscle in your body. So there is a lot of mindfulness and a lot of presence that you learn without really knowing that you learn it. It's just because you do that every day for several hours a day for years. You develop that incredible connection with your body. And of course, Iyengar is also very strong in therapy. His knowledge of the body and its biomechanic is very strong. So but I was trained in that very early in my training. And one day when my teacher said, well, it's time for you to go and teach, I thought, okay, even though I was freaking out at the time. I went to open a studio, or actually it was just renting a room in a church, I remember. And having my first two clients, one woman being pregnant and the other one having sore shoulders and sore hip. And I thought, well, it's not that easy to have a yoga class, and it's not that easy to teach when people are actually mostly having pain in their body. I experienced a lot of my students with injuries or chronic pain. And it was almost second nature to me to see them after class and help them with this. I developed a lot of intuition with this work. And little by little, I was known in the yoga world as being somebody who could treat people intuitively and of course, all backed up by a very serious background in biomechanics and therapy, if you wish. I did that kind of naturally. Those one-on-one sessions just grew organically. It was until I had an accident that it became really the path that I consciously choose to develop. So if shall I go into what happened at the time, or
so you had an accident, and that helped you say, okay, this is definitely where I need to work. So are you willing to share a little bit about what happened and how that inspired you to do this work?
Sure. Listen, it was this kind of day where you wake up and you don't know, but it's going to change your life. And I remember being in this incredibly beautiful house that I was minding with a friend of mine. And it was breakfast time. And I remember doing a silly thing is I put some toast to be grilled. It was not a thing of where you put the toast and it pops out. I had to time the grilling of the toast. And of course, in the meantime, I wanted to go to the bathroom, which was in the garden up the stairs. And I had a game with myself. I thought, I'm going to go and see whether I can time it so I don't burn the toast. And I run up to the bathroom and run down back to the boat shed where I was. And unfortunately, my shoes were not tied, and I felt myself falling. And when I fell, I torn my ankle, and I flipped over and damaged my sacrum, my spine, and my left hip. And because the foot was so much more painful for some reason, when I got at the hospital, they got me under a lot of morphine, but they never checked my back. And they just checked my ankle. And about 2 weeks later, I became completely numb from the waist down to the pelvic floor. And I had lost bowel control, and I was in constant pain. I had moved 2 vertebrae way forward in the spine, had damaged nerves, had a line fracture in the sacrum, and I absolutely couldn't move nor feel anything at that point. Because of my training, I knew that I had to find a chiropractor to free the nerve. So I went there and got that nerve freed over a few weeks of treatment. But the pain was always there. And for a yoga teacher, it meant that I could not move anymore, that I was going to teach sitting on a chair, talking my students through the class. And at the same time, I had several things happening just to make it more fun. I was menopausal, with all its array of mood swing and hot flashes. And I was in the middle of breaking a relationship. So my emotional health was very depleted and very shaky. I could not work the way that I used to work or practice yoga the way that I've been practicing for years. And for me, it was probably the worst of all. I lost a dear friend, and I was just in a mess, emotionally and physically. And I thought that I was going to get a lot of physio happening and that everything was going to be fixed. And this is where I realized the chasm that exists in our health system when it comes to chronic pain. And after seeing many chiropractors, many physiotherapists, kinesiologists, sports medicine doctors, I finally end up at the guru of all physiotherapists, who told me that the only way now was to get some medication, that we would avoid surgery, but I had to stop doing what I was doing and wait until my spine would fuse in order to maybe not have pain anymore. And for me, that was inconceivable. And after crying a lot and wondering what the hell I was going to do with my life, I decided that really someone somewhere with the kind of knowledge that we have in the world today, I would find some solution. So I thought maybe the people that have the most solution would be people who deal with sports elites, so Olympic trainers and consultants. So I knocked on the door of Olympic consultant and found some absolutely amazing knowledge that is not available to the public, or was not at the time. Amazing physio that just dealt with the stallions of sport. I contacted them, went to see them. They treated me. When they treated me, I found some extraordinary new ways of dealing with assessing the body. And I asked them to train me. Of course, they didn't want to, because after all, I was just nobody. I was a yoga teacher and a remedial massage therapist, which is not much in their eyes. But I was a bit of a pest. So much so that they did take me on board and train me. And then I went and thought, well, maybe I can do the same with people who know more about neuromuscular rehabilitation, people who know more about psychology of chronic pain. And so I knocked at the door of many people very good in the field, neuroplasticity experts, mind function experts, And I went and saw them and talked with them and trained with some of them, and thought that I would apply some of that to me. And as I'm getting better, I decided to open a clinic. And when I opened the clinic, I got people who had chronic pain for sometimes 10, 20, 30 years with absolutely no hope to get better. I realized that as I am working with them with what I've just learned, I'm starting to make a difference. But I'm learning from them as well, because what I'm learning is that it's through the way that they move and through the way that they hold themselves that they really maintain their chronic pain. So a whole different world appears to me, and I start to look at the body through the eyes and the lens of evolution. And I realized how much our posture embodies our emotions, our belief systems, and our past trauma. And so I start to train with very different people now. I knocked on doors because I realize how much the psychology is related to the posture and the way they move. I'm thinking maybe somewhere someone has found out something about it. And I found a school in the US actually called sensory motor psychotherapy, where psychologists and psychiatrists treat trauma, anxiety, depression, not by a one-on-one, mind-to-mind sessions, but by accessing how the mind has organized the emotional distress into the body, into the posture, into the muscles, into the way that they move. And so many of my patients that come with 10, 30 years of pain, I can see through their body and the way their body is moving, how they have embodied and shaped physically past trauma, belief systems, stress, anxiety, emotions. And it becomes an incredible eye-opener. And of course, there are many different kinds of chronic pain and how they live their chronic pain. And so now it's about finding ways to address it and talk with the patient, assess it, and give them a treatment appropriate. So the treatments can be very different from one person to another. And it all depends how I intuit, if you wish, or how I meet that person. So I never know what I'm going to do in a session, but I draw from all of these modalities, if you wish.
I was just going to ask you how much of what you're doing is, I imagine you just going for all these years, I'm getting goosebumps, knocking on all these doors and relentlessly getting all this amazing information. And then it's like it funnels through you and your amazing intuition and the ability to see and read and put the cognitive information you have together, but also with your soul and your intuition and your personal experience, like all together. And then out comes these great solutions and things to help people that nobody else had ever been able to help them with, because nobody has that constellation of knowledge and intuition, which is magical. And I'm sure that there are some clients and people that you've helped that had given up hope, like you mentioned, and didn't think that there was anything they could do, because in any one facet, that was probably true, but nobody ever put it all together and added the power of intuition to say, in this particular situation with what we're doing, this is how it embodies, and this is what we can do to free the jam. I imagine like all these traffic jams or log jams, and what you're doing is freeing the jams up so that the body can then heal. And
Absolutely.
That is fascinating. So is there a story, of course, keeping confidentiality of a somebody you
sure.
worked with or a patient that, that just really moved you that you would be willing to share with us?
Oh, for sure. Listen, I've got hundreds of them. But I think what maybe the audience would relate to is maybe if I give you several different ways that I've addressed some of the problems. The first that came in mind, which is often the case in people with chronic pain, is the fear of pain and the fear of being touched. After so many years, when they come to the clinic, I'm going to give you two examples that are two or three actually. There is this woman who came and said to me, after my accident, I had so much pain in my leg that now I can't take my children on to sit on my laps. So I haven't had my son sitting on my lap since he was a baby. And because of what I've learned, of course, and my training, I know that the body is never in the body. The pain is never in the body, sorry. The pain is always in the mind.
So the pain is in the mind. Listen to that, everybody. The pain is in the mind. It's not in the body.
The pain is in the mind. And what we have in the body is really the input and output of information that tell the brain that something is wrong. And then therefore, can you please send your little army of little healers so that we can repair tissue, etc., etc. But the pain is in first the spine, and it can be assessed first in the spine. It's kind of a dispatch office. Is it serious enough that we can bother the brain, or can we deal with that from that perspective? Or, well, it's serious enough, let's take it to the brain. So what happens is that the brain with chronic pain, gets into the habit of being in pain. So people say it's a disease. Pain is a disease itself, but it's not. It really is a learned behavior, if you wish, of the brain. And so when that person cannot have her son on her lap because she's in pain in her thigh and she's so afraid of even touching that pain, my first intuition is to go there and put my hand above the thigh and ask her the question, is it painful? No. Are you in fear? Yes. Okay. Can you just breathe there, and shall I go and put my hand a little bit closer to your thigh until I touch it? That can take 5 minutes, that can take 10 minutes, that can take half an hour. So little by little, I apply touch on the side that is in pain. And as the person releases the fear of pain and the fear of being touched, I keep pressing on that part of her body until she realizes that really there is no pain there and that it's all okay. Sometimes it takes one session. For that woman, in one session, that was it. It was done. And she came the following week saying, oh my God, this is amazing. My son is now on my lap and I'm not fearful anymore. Another person was a very old person who broke my heart. He was very old and he had his hands with a lot of arthritis. And he said, I haven't held my wife's hand for years. And he had tears on his eyes. And I thought, oh my God, this is horrible. And so I said, okay, well, hold my hand. So in the same way as I'm holding his hand and little by little, making him realize that the pain is not in the hand. He can shake, he can hold, he couldn't hold a cup, let alone shake or hold his wife's hands. And so in touching them and making really them, awakening them to the fact that they're okay, it releases the belief system straight away. So a lot of patients just need that. Some others are very different. I've had people coming, for instance, with a lot of tension in their body, and they are tense constantly, and they do not know why they're tense. They've done physios and chiros and everybody. And when I look at them, because I have a lot of intuition and I can read their body, I can see that the tension is an emotional tension and a belief system tension. So I remember this woman who arrived saying, well, I can't get rid of that tension. It's just constant. And my first question was a really silly question. I said, well, do you dance? And she said, oh, no, I don't dance. Okay. Do you shake sometimes? Do you shake your body? Oh, no, I don't shake. Well, have you had any experience where you had to really keep rigid in your body? And of course, she went straight to her youth with a lot of trauma and fear from her mother. And that fear had really embodied and shaped the way that she moved. She carried that tension, throughout her life. And until she became aware of where it came from, she couldn't let it go. So the first thing is always to become aware of what is making you the way that you are. And of course, for me, her first exercise was to go home, put Michael Jackson on, and actually just move very quickly and shake it and do this really silly, uncontrolled movement. So these are technique that you use with people like this.
Now,
it become more complicated. Sorry, yes.
I'm sure that all of us are going, wow, this is amazing. Listening to how you can connect on that intuitive level and help them release these things. So do you only work with people in person? Do you work with people, like if somebody's listening to the podcast and they're not in Australia, that you can work with them online in video? Or do you only do it in person?
Yeah, I do it. Definitely do it online. I've started to do that when I moved around and I was traveling in Bali, and some of my clients were saying, oh my God, you're going, who am I going to see? And I said, well, we'll try and do that online and see whether it works. And it worked. So yes, I do online consult. It's a little bit more difficult when the chronic pain is postural or biomechanical. For instance, somebody who would come with a distorted posture, with the muscle very tight on one side, very loose on the other, and maybe the shoulder rounded and constant neck pain or constant lower back pain because their pelvis is in a wrong position. It's a very different way of assessing them and treating them. I need to know what the posture of the body is in order to know what kind of emotion is driving that posture. I'll give you an example. The body has evolved its shape and its movement patterns because of our interaction and relationship with our environment. Humans have evolved to be on 2 feet, to bend in the middle, to have 4 limbs. And so it limits, in a way, the way that you move, and it dictates some really fundamental physical laws that we need to respect. The first one being gravity, in order for that spine and that body to move in the best possible way, let the energy flow the best possible way, and therefore free not only our health but our mind to be at the best possible state. Now, somebody who has spent years believing that they are not worth it, or they are not able to, or their parents have put them down, or they've had a trauma of some kind, it will be embodied in the posture. And muscle eventually will drag the spine out of its alignment, and fundamental emotions like fear, for instance, would freeze your body into a stress response. And that stress response is always dictating the way that your muscles are tense or not. And of course, people like this living in chronic pain, or what I call chronic stress, are going to have a posture and a muscle tension that will always create misalignment in the body. Now, when you have an accident, all of this take place when I fell, for instance, every bit of this stress response took place as I am falling, because this stress, the fight-flight response, is kind of holding certain muscles in certain position. Now, it freezes like this, if you wish, in chronic pain. It does not release. An animal in the wild will always release the stress response, but we are not doing this as human. So postural chronic pain is a little bit complicated to treat online, but I've put a program that can help people self-assess, and I assess them when I see them, but it's a little bit different from the other kind of chronic pain, of course.
Right.
Sorry, it's a bit long, but there's so much in this.
I'm fascinated. I'm like sitting here listening to you, fascinated. And of course, many times I'm like, well, this applies to this person. This applies to that person. This is fascinating to me. And I, in my work, I talk a lot about the 5 major areas: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social, all working together. Everything affects everything. And everything is impacted by everything. And that's just the way it is. And I'm listening to you, and it's like you're saying a lot of the similar things from a completely different origin and viewpoint, but yet it all comes to the same kind of place, that it's all connected.
Absolutely.
And I love what you're saying about seeing the emotion in how the body is and the posture. And it's funny, not in a ha-ha sense, but it's interesting, because I've always said that the body's neutral and it bears the burden, and the body will tell you right where the issues are. And I don't know that I have anything more than my intuition to say what it is. I don't have the same kind of education you have, but I know that. And so as you're speaking, I'm like, oh, wow, you have all this other cool information and experience and knowledge that puts together and like puts more richness to something I have always intuitively known and seen.
Yes.
And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who would probably want to know more. So you have a website, right?
Indeed.
What is your website?
It's www.scopemethod.com.
Scopemethod.com. I will put that link in the show notes so you can look her up. I've looked at this website and it's fascinating to me, and I work with a lot of people with all different kinds of things happening, and many of the things on your website are interesting and more rich and full than some other things that I've seen. So check out scopemethod.com, and you will be very glad you did, especially if you've got stress in your body, especially chronic stress. And because there is healing and there is help, and there's a way you can help yourself, and there's a way to get yourself off that stuck spot if you're there. So one last question. I mean, I could go on forever, but that's probably not in the best interest of everybody. But one last question. If there was a message you would want to say to somebody who maybe is kind of quietly feeling alone and maybe a little desperate and not understood when it comes to chronic stress in their body and things, what would you say to help them, give them a little hope, or maybe a tip you could give them to help them begin to see that they don't have to be stuck?
They certainly don't have to be stuck. I think for me, I've realized with many of people who have distress and anxiety and fear, that the best way to change the mind is to go straight to the body. The first thing is just change your posture to a posture that is tall, that is grounded. So feel your feet on the ground. Feel the crown of your head extending toward the heaven. Feel that your body can be strong, centered, and open. And just by taking this posture, opening the shoulders, you will find straight away that it's very difficult to be depressed when you address just the body posture. The breath, of course. I mean, nothing better than the breath to free yourself and your stack energy. Most of us in stress time have got very shallow breath, and we tend to breath from the top of the chest, or for the more tired people, just from the very bottom of their belly. So deep breath, so that you can really help yourself take that energy into the body. I always believe that when you take a breath in, you take the energy of life into your body, and then you have two ways to deal with that breath. You have a breath that you can exhale and release and let go and relax into that exhalation, which send a message directly to the brain that everything is okay and there is no threat. But there is also a breath where you can exhale to do something, to have power, to exhale to express. And so sometimes if you need to punch or scream or use that exhalation to express your emotion, the body, for me, shapes our emotion and shape the mind. So it's always mindfulness, and it's always through the breath, and it's always through the posture that you can start addressing and seeing how you feel when you do those very, very simple yet powerful and fundamental exercises.
That is so helpful. So the breath, of course, and standing differently. I know that I was in a car accident not long ago, and the pain was so bad. And then when I finally was getting some real relief, I remember standing up one day, and when I stood up, I was grounded in my feet, and my shoulders were back for the first time since the wreck. And I felt it, and I was like more awake and more alive. And I'm like, okay, that means the healing's really working.
Yeah.
And so how we stand really does change things, and we can start to just move in our body different and then begin to see where that is. So that's very wise advice. And so try that, everybody. Try moving around, changing what it is, and then let us know what you think. You can email either one of us and let us know, how did it work for you? Because if you don't try it and you just listen to us, it's entertainment. If you try it, it's healing. That's how it works. So I want
moving, if I just may say so, moving and exercises creates this beautiful dopamine in our brain. So, I mean, everybody knows that the difficult step is the first step, because we think that when we are tired and depleted, that going to exercise is going to make us more depleted and more tired. But if we find the courage to do that little step towards moving, we already change not only our modus operandi in our mind, and we become courageous. But moving, absolutely, moving and standing tall will change the way that you feel.
So thank you, Sylviane, for coming on the show today. And you're probably listening to this podcast, maybe you're moving, right? And then you're already doing what we're suggesting you do. But listen to the advice and re-listen to different things you can do to help yourself be alive and alert and awake and enthusiastic. Because after all, joy is our natural state. So everybody, until the next episode, keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, And remember, you're perfect just the way you are. Have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Are you tired of searching for someone who understands you? Join our Facebook group, Someone Gets Me. In this group, you will be able to connect with others who are intense, sensitive, smart, talented, and wanting to be understood. Diane shares her insights and teachings, and you can connect with others. Join today.